President Biden's countrywide Investing in America tour is underway, highlighting the manufacturing boom fueled by the administration's legislation. Private companies have committed some $491 billion in investments so far across industries like semiconductor and EV manufacturing. But critics argue the mad dash to invest in clean, renewable initiatives comes at a great cost to investors, taxpayers, and American workers. Here with more is Allysia Finley, Wall Street Journal editorial board member. So, Allysia, let's dive right into this. You put out a piece a couple days ago diving into Bidenomics. What is the cost that you see?
Well, I think the problem is that the government is distorting investment. And whenever government picks winners and losers, there are often more losers. And those losers are the taxpayers mainly. In this case, the Inflation Reduction Act, it was estimated to cost about or just the climate subsidies, about $370 billion. But some recent estimates from outside groups, including Goldman Sachs, are saying it's actually going to cost $1.2 trillion or more because all these companies are rushing in to exploit the subsidies. Now, the problem is that when they're in their rush to exploit the subsidies, oftentimes they're ignoring quality control issues. But also, again, the investment is going to these, for instance, electric vehicles, but also carbon capture, hydrogen, other, inchoate technologies that otherwise really aren't fully developed. And really, when private government dictates where capital flows, you create misallocations of capital, and that ends up in purely economics terms, a deadweight loss.
There's always been an issue, though, tracking to see and making sure that there is the appropriation of funds that gets carried through to where those funds were intended to go towards. And so what steps do you believe could be taken both in the public and the private sector to improve that transparency so that both taxpayers as well as investors know where some of the overall commitments have actually netted out and what the results have been?
Well, I think that they should be required to report on how they're the companies that are receiving all this money. And some of this is in terms of grants. Some of it, and again, this is actually, it doesn't just impact the climate subsidies. Also, you have the bipartisan infrastructure bill as well as the semiconductor bill, which allocated almost $200 billion to the chips industries. Now, I think that the companies who are receiving the money should be required to report on how they're using it. Now, I don't think that the government should impose other restrictions as they are, such as requiring the companies in terms of the chip makers to provide basically free childcare or imposing some kind of profit sharing requirements. They should be required to, at least, show how they are using the money. But of course, my position or belief is that, the government shouldn't be giving this money in the first place, and that they should actually be raising money from, private investors. And if these, projects or programs are really worthwhile, they shouldn't have a problem raising money in the private markets.
So, Allysia, I got to ask you, where do you see his challengers potentially putting a pin in terms of what they can do to counter Biden?
No, I think that they have an opportunity to highlight some of the other jobs that are being, again, destroyed in this, rush to, or as I deemed it, a green energy subsidy rush. You saw with Ford announce that it's laying off about 33,000 employees as it tries to gear up its electric vehicle production. The United Auto Workers has estimated that this EV transition is going to cost it 35,000 jobs. You're seeing jobs lost in oil and gas. Again, these are good paying jobs. And so I think that they could just highlight, yes, there are some jobs being gained in some places, but you're also seeing jobs lost in others. And the problem is, workers, we saw this 20 or 30 years ago, right? When you saw a lot of jobs lost in manufacturing. Well, yes, there are now new jobs, but it does create some economic dislocations. Workers may have to move and such. And ensure if the new jobs are more productive and pay more, there's an economic argument for it. But here, the problem is that they really aren't creating any great improvements, technological improvements that will increase productivity in the long term.
And so, I guess, even as we think about what qualifies as a good paying job relative and up against either what your kind of living situation is in certain regions or what inflation is, as all of this is kind of a part of a larger cycle, of course, all the time that we have to go through, where it's, okay, if there's job displacement in one arena, perhaps there's a better job that comes across later on. Does anything within, or what you've seen within the administration's efforts to make sure that we are either combating inflation or having infrastructure move forward to create better roads, bridges, technological advancements, what have you, that those jobs are actually paying well enough to offset the cost of living, to offset inflation as well?
Well, the problem is that a lot of these jobs, again, they don't in the green energy. And actually, what often gets overlooked is that green energy actually isn't as profitable as oil and gas right now. But those jobs don't pay as well. So there again, you're right that there are dislocations. I think the government is now trying to mandate prevailing wages. These are essentially set by the unions on a lot of the semiconductor projects, and wind energy and such. And the Inflation Reduction Act actually includes bonus tax credits for companies or developers that use or agree to follow prevailing wage requirements. Now, these are just actually the issues that they're going to raise the costs, and then they may make the projects less worthwhile. So it's essentially now government is also now trying to dictate wages, which opens up a whole new can of worms.
Allysia Finley, who's the Wall Street Journal editorial board member. Thanks so much for taking the time today.